to stay at least
On time.
a little bit on time, which we have done over the whole day, which is quite incredible, especially for me. I am never really on time, so that's good. We would like to continue with another panel discussion, and the idea is to talk about corporates and startups, how they can work together in a better way in various aspects. That means investing, but also something that's often overlooked. Talking about how startups can get or acquire corporates as clients, and what we always say in the B2B arena, especially if you only sell to other startups, you'll always stay a shitty, irrelevant company. So you need to acquire larger corporates as clients, and I think corporates are more open than ever to do that. We have, unfortunately, 3 gentlemen, not because you're male, that's obviously okay. Would have been, but I think we've been quite diverse over the whole conference, but this panel is not very diverse. Sorry for that, but we think we have a lot of competence here in the room, and I think that should be okay. Just quickly, before we go into the content, I'd like to introduce our panelists. We have Udo Kieslich on the right-hand side. Udo is the MD of Collex, which is a very interesting project because it's a joint venture between several corporates, Bitburger, Coca-Cola, and?
Krombacher.
Okay. And you guys are doing a B2B service for everything beverage related. And I think it's a very interesting example that we also see in other aspects that corporates are basically putting their resources together. And then we have Florian Resac, who is the CEO of all things digital at Viessmann. He'll explain to us a little later what that exactly means. Viessmann does an awful lot in digital. It's probably one of the most advanced companies when it comes to digitalization and what they do. And it's obviously also a household brand, but mainly focused on B2B. And then we have Marius, who's a partner at Henkel X Ventures. Henkel X is a platform to enable the cooperation between startups and corporates, but also a VC fund under one roof. But it would be great if you guys would quickly explain what you do. We start with Udo, and then we go into the questions. Yeah?
Okay, so thanks for invitation. Collex is we are a tech company, helping wholesalers to sell beverages in the B2B segment in Germany. And we've been founded 12 months ago with a funding, with the idea from these 3 corporates, well-known corporates, Coke, Bitburger, and Krombacher. And ever since we are growing, we are just out of the so-called closed beta phase. So you're welcome to download our app. And in terms of diversity, we have 40% women employed. And we are now looking for scaling. And maybe the interesting thing, but we will talk later about it, is that we have at the moment 3 well-known corporates as our shareholders.
And one has to say, Bitburger and Krombacher are really direct head-to-head competitors, right?
Pardon me?
Bitburger and Krombacher are really head-to-head, quite intense competitors.
I think so. They are competing mainly for the beer market, although they have also other brands. But I've just checked out, so some brands are missing over there. Yeah. But no, seriously, Coke is well known for water, soft drinks, and so on, but also have teas. You just can think for yourself, is there a restaurant where there is any product missing from either of them? I guess no. And that's our key, one of our main strengths, because we have a very strong distribution team.
Yeah, but I think it's a very interesting phenomenon that corporates that used to be competitors, fierce competitors, are basically joining up forces.
For this project.
For this project, not overall. We are not announcing a merger here of Bitburger and Krombacher. So that's not the case. Talking about Viessmann, would be great if you could quickly explain to us what are you doing at Viessmann? I mean, everybody knows Viessmann, but what's kind of the digital dimension of Viessmann?
Yeah, I hope you all know Viessmann. Most of you who live in houses probably know it. So the company is doing heating systems mainly, but also climate solutions. And Fissmann, I mean, is basically a brand, and VCO is the digital diversification division of Fissmann. And it includes 5 different things. So one is WhatX, that's an incubator. Then it's Vito Ventures, it's a venture capital firm. In Munich, Vito One, it's mainly business angel fund. And our latest addition, it's actually the Maschinenraum, which is mainly a platform for the so-called Mittelstand in Germany, with Fissmann being one of the, hopefully, drivers of the Mittelstand digitalization. And we do have an internal venture development group in the team, and everything is combined under the VCO, the 3 letters.
Okay. But you are also driving the digitalization of the core business, or is that driven somewhere else?
We have teams on both sides, but everyone learns from the other, so that's
Okay.
basically connected.
Okay. Marius, what is Henkel X?
Yes. Well, first of all, Florian, congratulations. It's been a big week actually for both of us on the closing of your 180 million fund.
Thank you.
It's a testament to all of the great stuff you guys are doing and expanding to Stockholm and London. So second of all, thanks for having me. I really always enjoy your conferences. I was at the one last year, and I said, I think you've grown 3x versus last year, but apparently I was wrong. It was 2.9.
No.
So, but congratulations.
2.5.
So on the screen, it's digital lead operations and strategy. That was until Monday of this week, when it was announced that we will be transitioning Henkel X, which is an open innovation platform, to add another work stream to it, which I'm very proud of, which is the venture part of it. So going forward, we will be known as Henkel X Ventures, and I'm one of the general partners. So what do we do on a daily basis? As you mentioned, we pride ourselves on really working closely with startups and trying to get proof of concepts going with them. We fundamentally believe we are in an era where all large organizations need to be doing more experiments and embracing working with more startups, because the rate of change is just so fast. Secondly, what we do is we also focus on building out an ecosystem. We know we can't do this alone. We need partners, we need strong partners, and I'm proud also to say we will be partnering with Fissmann Group and Maschinenraum going forward. So
we move in together.
We're moving in together. So look out for us in future on events. We also do a lot around diversity. So we've been focused on upskilling and specifically on diversity. Very proud to announce that on the 15th of November here in Berlin, we will be hosting the largest female ideation hackathon. So if you're a female and you've got an idea, or even if you don't have an idea, you absolutely have to apply, and you've got 1 week left. So, and we've only got about 10 or 15 spots left. So hurry up, go to our webpage.
Yeah, that sounds like a good opportunity.
Yes.
Diving into the content, there's always a big discussion going on whether startups should take money from a corporate.
Yep.
You are driving, obviously, forward with the thesis that it would make sense to take money from a corporate. What kind of startups should take money from a corporate? Where does it make sense for which kind of model or which kind of sector to take money, for example, from Henkel X, but also in general? And where would you rather take a regular financial VC?
Well, our approach for our Henkel X Ventures is going to be a combination of financial and strategic. You know, there's this slogan in venture, there's nothing as strategic about a company that's gone bankrupt. Mm-hmm. So you really need to have a lens of having a financial and a strategic lens. And for us, I think our approach is very clear. We need to be able to add value. Mm-hmm. So if it's something that's completely out of our range of experience or exposure, then I would, and we do advise startups that we don't see a good fit to don't, you know, come and work for us or work with us, you know, to get a proof of concept going or to take money from us. But we're very open about experimenting. You know, we have a little acronym that we use as BCP. You know, if you're a startup, really make sure that, you know, there's budget, really make sure that you've got an internal champion, mm-hmm. and really make sure that you're solving a problem for the organization. Mm-hmm. So if you think about the last one, you know, if you're doing something in a space that's not relevant, then you're not really solving a problem for us. Yeah. And therefore, we won't be able to add value for you. So our mantra is, you know, a lot of VCs, traditional VCs say, you know, they add value in Project A. You guys are very, very hands-on. And we consider ourselves kind of the equivalent of that, the operational corporate venture arm, because we really want to be able to add value. Otherwise, it's not a win-win.
Yeah. Okay, so it would make sense if a startup in your case, but also in the case of other VCs, corporate VCs, fits with some of the business units of that corporate, and if there's some kind of use case one could do together,
Yes.
then it would make sense.
Absolutely, and we pride ourselves on if a startup comes to us and we run a proof of concept and it works quite well, given the ecosystem of partners that we've created, we are more than happy to pick up the phone and call all of our peers in the industry and say, we've worked with the startup, these were the results that we had, we absolutely think the team is great, you need to work with them. So we really want to open doors for people and make the right introductions.
Okay. Florian, probably one question with regards to the setup, because there's two models, basic models in corporate VC, and you're employing one, but they could also do different things, and I think in the past you've also done it differently. You can either invest off the balance sheet of a corporate and do direct investments, or you can set up a dedicated VC fund structure. If you are a founder, what would you prefer and why?
I think it depends on your current situation in life. So if you are maybe a little bit older and you already have a family and you need a little bit more of a setup that would allow you to do an entrepreneurial thing and still have your salary that's a little bit higher than usually if you just found from nothing. And then it would be one option to go into a more venture capital, corporate venture capital surrounding. So with WhatX, for example, our incubator, we have models that you come with your own idea and then we chip in money, say 250,000, and then we develop it together. But the amount of shares, of course, is then lower than if you just do it and on your own, and then you go to a VC and you start from bootstrapping to business angel to friends and family, and then to Series A. So I think this highly depends on if you really say, okay, this is a perfect idea, but I need a certain amount of cash flow. And I still have my own decisions, but not totally. And then on the other hand, you want to be totally free to be entrepreneurial, then you would go the other way and just pitch and go with standard venture capital. So both things make sense depending on what you achieve.
If you are the former type, so the one that needs a little more cash flow, more security, what's the best way to approach, for example, like WhatX or you guys? I mean, how does it work?
Yeah, I think they're all on LinkedIn and they're pretty visible most of the times. And maybe compared to 5 years ago when you tried to approach a Mittelstands companies, this was pretty insane because you couldn't find the right person. Most of the employees weren't on LinkedIn because it was not needed. You know, you're more in an internal part. And now this has opened up. So we do have people and colleagues that are basically acting as a liaison manager. So if you have an idea and you want to do a venture clienting model and you pitch the idea to the corporate, there's an innovation team. So you just send it there and then you talk to them. And then WhatX also, if you know the concept of an incubator, there's a couple of those out there and then you just send your ideas. And I think they're all pretty open to talk.
Okay. Udo, you have been a corporate founder basically twice now. With All You Need, that was initiated by DHL, and now with Collex. So what's your learning basically from that? Would you recommend, I mean, obviously you've done it again, yeah?
I'm biased.
Although All You Need went okay, but in the end, it probably is fair to say it wasn't the greatest success that you guys imagined, and you again went into a corporate entrepreneurship kind of role.
Yeah.
Why?
The first opportunity was just by accident. So there was a very interesting opportunity to enter 2012's e-food market. Maybe a little bit too early, but it was very exciting, and I wouldn't sit here if I haven't done that. So that was, personally for me, it was a great move. And but it was a single corporate investor with no corporate VC fund, no corporate funding structure, and maybe the long-term strategic objective was not fully defined in hindsight, of course. With Collex, it was a little bit different. The idea was basically came from the three companies. The top management had aligned after a couple of meetings that they wanted to enter the digital space, that they want to do it together. and they were smart enough to recognize that it's better that somebody else is doing it. And then we somehow met and talked about it a long time, and I was a little bit cautious because I was rather thinking of maybe doing something else. And 3 corporates is even more than 2 or 1.
Yeah.
It's a kind of overdose. But over time, my confidence in the project and the setup grew. There were a couple of things where I was looking and checking degree of freedom, seriousness of the decision maker, and maybe also very important was, could I sell the story to my new employees? Because if it wasn't about me, whether I want to do it and sign the contract, but whether we had good chances in the market and whether I could convince top people to join me, whether it's a credible story, because alone you cannot achieve anything. Yeah, and over time we worked together, a good setup, and now it seems to work.
Yeah. And if I may, I would also like to add some learnings to that I've seen. I've also seen a couple of corporate startups, and my take is now, I think if you have a champion in the organization that is really powerful, and where you know that person is going to be there probably in 5 years from now, with a high likelihood, then you can probably do it. And the other thing is, if there's really the financial backing to a degree that you don't need money from the outside world. Yes. Yeah, that's at least my take. I think if you have a corporate setup where you need outside funding quite early in the cycle, that's always very difficult. I mean, if you have an About You type project where Bestseller Group invested like a year ago, after 3-4 years, that's okay. Yeah, but I think if you would have gone for outside funding, even at an About You 2 years before, it probably wouldn't have worked. And probably one point I would like to add, my preference, I don't know whether you would see that as well, an additional degree of security you would get as an entrepreneur if you have a separate fund structure or some kind of money flows that are independent of the CFO. Yeah? Yeah. Because if you have a CFO, they can always, you know, if, for example, the economic downturn comes, whether it's in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, nobody knows. But the moment it comes, my feeling is the first budgets that are going to be cut is marketing
yes.
and corporate venturing.
Yeah.
And then you don't want to be sitting in that, because corporate venturing will produce results in like 5-10 years. Then the CFO will very likely be gone. Yeah? So I would at least recommend also to every corporate, but also to every entrepreneur, create structures where you cannot get the money out of before the projects are financially suitable. Yeah?
It's actually funny you mention it, because that's the best time to have a venture arm, right?
Yeah.
When the tide has gone out, because then all of the crappy startups are going to die and the good ones remain, and then you need to be able to pull the trigger.
Yeah, that's true. But you need to be really confident in venture.
Yeah.
But that's true. I mean, I don't know whether that's aware to you guys, but the cohorts of funds that have been funded in like 2001, 2003, and 2008-9 are actually the best performing cohorts.
The best vintage years.
Whether it's in the US or here. So, you know, investing counter-cyclical is definitely something that makes a lot of sense. When looking at Viessmann, what is your main motivation? And also, what do you perceive in other corporates? Is the main motivation earning money, financial, or is it mainly to build knowledge and basically transform the core business or develop new digital business? What do you think is also the most healthy kind of motivation behind it?
I think we picked the setup for several reasons, but one was in the venture fund that we run. That's actually a corporate finance vehicle, so it's driven by financial invest. But we try to invest in companies that do deep tech, if you can. I know it's a buzzword, but so we have one that's basically doing the LiDAR system. It's called Artisans in cars, autonomous cars, and so what can we learn from them? Basically, how they develop it, how they use agile methods. So we try to learn from the startups. We also invested in ESA Aerospace. I don't know if you know them. They do 3D printed rocket pieces. So that sounds weird, but in Bavaria it's a big topic because they want to put a lot of money in there. And also we learned a lot about how to produce with 3D printing. So that there's things you can learn and adapt. On the other hand, this is a more financial interest, and in the venture development, we do our own. We try to come up with new business models on our existing portfolio. So right now you can purchase a heating system like a Spotify abo, so you pay a monthly fee, which was totally new. 2 years ago you couldn't do that because it's not so easy from the financial perspective, you know, like it's a fixed thing, not like a car, so you cannot rip out the heating system. That's not so easy. So we came up with new business models. So there's learning, but also investing in the own business model change.
If you want to acquire a corporate as a customer, you've tried to create a platform for exactly that. What is the best way from your experience to get like Henkel Adhesive, which I think is actually the coolest business unit that not a lot of people know, but actually makes most money.
Yes.
And as well, how can I get these guys 9 billion euro revenue, 10 billion business unit as a customer? And how can you help doing that? What's the best way? Also, probably as a general advice to startups?
Yeah, I go back to a little internal acronym that we use, which is BCP, making sure there's budget, making sure you have an internal champion, and last but not least, making sure it's a priority and a problem for the organization. So as a startup, you know, and as you well know, also in the venture space, there's a lot to be said for getting a warm introduction, a warm referral. So use your network to first find somebody in the organization where there's a high likelihood, and you can just go on LinkedIn with titles these days, it's amazing, and just find somebody with a title innovation, and I bet you all the money in the world, that person is looking for a great idea because that's how they're incentivized. Yeah. So find those people in the organization who would be the highest, or who would have the highest motivation to work with a startup and experiment stuff. And once you've identified them, have a conversation about, well, what is really my problem? One of the biggest challenges that we come across when startups come and pitch to us is it's taken them so long sometimes to get to that seating table. When they start and they sit down, they rush through the pitch, and when you're done, you're like, they didn't ask us any questions. They didn't even ask us what our problem is really all about. So the second bit of advice I would say is listen. Especially in the first meeting, listen and ask a ton of questions, because it is amazing how much you will learn and how deep the problem can go in an organization once you start asking the right questions.
So when it comes to Viessmann, what would you recommend? I can either go through the Innovation Scout, I know the guy in the business unit doing it, or I can get an introduction to Max Viessmann himself. These are the three options. Which is the best one to actually go by if you are a startup?
You can write
Writing to Max on LinkedIn?
Yeah. He most likely forwards the email, so it definitely works. Although his inbox recently became a little bit overcrowded, even more.
Superhuman.
Yes. Now, what I realized, that one thing to add on that is that if you go with a corporate venture in whatever way, you most likely end up with your first client if you do it well, if you ask the right questions. And what's interesting, and I didn't know that because I'm with a corporate since 5 years only, so I had my own companies before. The level of trust in between the Mittelstands companies at least is super high, and most of the operational people working in one specific field, they know each other. So if you implement it with Viessmann, most likely you can get a good shot at Knauf or another Mittelstands company. So this helps a lot in terms of your funnel, your sales funnel. So who do you approach? I think you would find VCO, but literally we try to have everyone involved in the company. They'll say we'll forward the respective email if you say you have a pitch or an idea, and it will end up at my desk or someone else's who would take care of it. And you can go to Maschinenraum, little sales promotion, not only to see Marius and Ramin, but also this should be like a hub where you can exchange ideas and then talk about them and also pitch or sell actually.
Udo, I want to take up one point you said earlier, and that is you have 3 corporates.
At the moment.
And there might even be more coming, and you might argue, wow, you know, 1 is already a pain in the ass, you have 3. Is that a good thing? I mean, because you mentioned that it can also be a good thing. Can you elaborate a little bit on, because the same thing applies if you have 1 corporate VC, can you basically, you know, somehow compensate for that by having another one and they kind of even out.
Okay, so maybe 3 comments. So of course I'm biased. Huh? That's clear. No, first of all, I knew before that there will be in the start 3 corporates. So that was basically up to me whether that's a challenge I like to accept. And I did my due diligence. I had long interview rounds, so I know the people who are in charge. And so that was a personal thing, what was important to me. There was one funny aspect which I noticed after, let's say, 6 months. If you have a single corporate, there's a high risk. There's one sponsor or key person who is pushing the project. And along the lines, there comes a wish, yeah, let's do a yellow pony. Yeah, we need a yellow pony, whether that fits to the platform or to the strategy doesn't matter. The corporate board member wants a yellow pony. Yeah? And if you have a single investor, that's hard to argue. Then you have to code a yellow pony because the board member thinks yellow pony is flavor of the year. Yeah? But if you have 2, at least 3, then there comes a very surprising effect which I didn't anticipate, but which is very welcome, that if one corporate says, I want a yellow pony, the other 2 corporates say, okay, how does it fit to the strategy? What does the management say? Then I say, yeah, yellow pony, doesn't have to be this way. And then the others say, okay, if you want a yellow pony, you have to pay for the yellow pony. And then this proposal is off the table. And so they mitigate each other to a certain degree. Of course, if all 3 corporates say we want to have a yellow pony, then the odds are against me. But that's a very positive effect. So as a kind of sanity check. And I would say, let's say between 3 to 6 corporates are doable, and you can, you need to keep a good corporate relationship management to keep them informed. But that was an effect I didn't anticipate, and which makes working in the startup easy.
Yeah. And I think that's a general learning. I think you can also see if you look at companies like Spotify, etc., they don't just have universal music, but they have like 5, 6, 7 music companies in their cap table, and thereby somehow, you know, mitigate the strategic effect. And I think that's one definitive learning that you can get from this. If you have a good corporate setup or corporate governance kind of setup, it's completely okay if you have several corporates on board. That can actually be fine. Let's probably talk a little bit about corporate startups. BCG, Digital Ventures, you know, the arm of BCG, claims they've done 80 startups so far. I couldn't actually believe that number, but I'm sure it's true, yeah, over the last 3, 4, 5 years. So there's an enormous, and that's just BCG, yeah? And there's Adventures, McKinsey builds startups, etc. So a lot of corporates build startups now, and there's examples like About You. Do you think that we will see that continuing, that people basically say one element of digital transformation is building corporate startups, and that it is a good thing to be involved in that? Marius?
It's a very interesting question because, you know, incubators, accelerators, company building, you know, came about, what, 5 or so years ago. Mm-hmm. And I think that is, the hype around it has died down a bit. So, you know, the question I think we ask ourselves is, well, what are you trying to achieve? Mm-hmm. You know, is it, oh, I'm working with BCG and they're going to build me a great company and you can make a nice story about it? Or is it, well, you know, I've really looked everywhere. Mm-hmm. I don't find what I'm looking for, and therefore it justifies building something internally? Or is it, well, I want to get my employees more engaged and do something more entrepreneurial? Our belief is, in this day and age, the likelihood of you not finding a startup out there that's doing something to solve your exact problem is quite low. Mm-hmm. So therefore, you know, traditionally when you look at the statistics, corporates have always, or for the most part, 70 or 67% of the time, they want to build because it's the not invented here syndrome, right? They want to do it in-house. And I think we at least are seeing a change with the mentality that realizing that you cannot do everything internal. And that's why we created Henkel X, which is an ecosystem, is we want to tap into all of the great ideas and all of the opportunities out there and work with those people in-house. You don't have to do everything yourself. And frankly, that's why Europe is in a little bit of a pickle, because for the longest time, most corporates have been so focused on protecting their own little field and trying to do everything internal that it's gotten them into trouble.
Yeah. What's your view? I mean, what's the Viessmann view? Are you building stuff yourself? Do you have BCG building it for you?
No.
Okay.
They probably do a great job. No, we build it ourselves in part with WhatX. It's a company builder in terms. What we learned, and this is I think a big learning, adding to that the identifying the right problem and probably join with another or go together with another company that has the same problem originally already, and then build it. Because when we started, we did ideation phases, we came up with our own ideas, and then we created some companies, and there's a big difference between the B2B part and B2C part. So I think for the B2B part, it's easier because then you can identify several problems that are somehow aligned or similar. And I think there's a couple of examples, FinLeap, for example, who always develop with others together. And I think you need to find a certain amount of same companies with the same problems and then create an actual venture development. Then it should work.
Okay. One element of this is, and this is probably also interesting to the audience, I mean, if you consider doing entrepreneurship, corporate entrepreneurship together with a big corporate, one key element there is also compensation. Yeah. So, and the perception kind of is, if you want to get really rich, you have to do stuff yourself. Yeah, which is probably not always true because the risk is also a lot higher. So how much do you make, Udo? No, just kidding. But the compensation structures that we see right now with corporates, my perception is at least have become a lot more entrepreneurial. Yeah, so that corporates are actually willing to give very entrepreneurial packages to people that they get on board to run projects. What's your perspective there? Have you seen, like, from all you need to today, do you see a development in mentality that corporates are willing to share more?
Well, it depends on the setup and how sophisticated the corporate is, and what the motivation for this digital initiative is in the first place. I guess if it's a corporate VC, with each investment they have the question, how do we incentivize management, what's their share, and so on. If it's a single investment or where they are not used to it, then it's a kind of learning process. Of course, you can find instrument, phantom stocks, whatever, because you cannot, in the beginning, argue, okay, let's do an IPO in 3 years. Yeah? But I think the most important point was coming back to this talent argument, because I can negotiate for myself quite well, I guess. But the most important point was, how do I motivate and incentivize the next top 5 people? Because without them, I'm basically lost. I cannot code. I can do a little bit Excel, but that's it. And so we had a long discussion and conversation, and I can convince the shareholders that they find structures and ways. So we have a alignment of interest in the management team. So there is at the moment no difference to a classical startup. We have just different instruments because they understand that's important to get talent, to align the alignment of interest, and then everybody is giving 150%.
But how do you do that in a setting where stock options you'll probably be never really sold, right?
So yeah, but we are very much data driven, and we have orders, we have customers, we have other measurable KPIs, and so you can set up certain goals and align the team along these goals. Of course, then you are compensated with cash, with money, but it's basically performance orientated. It's just a different instrument. So the shareholders, by and large, keep their shares, and it's compensated in a decent way. And we are basically also value orientated. So we are not looking for break even by the end of the year. We are rather looking for value maximization, which means in our case, rollout, getting customers, getting wholesalers, get relevant, and then basically the motivation of the team and of the shareholders is fully aligned. So we have no let's say, I would say, no disadvantage to attract very talented people.
Okay. How is it at WhatX, for example, if you found a company with Viessmann together, what is my share, or how does a normal cap table looks like? I mean, are you willing to share that?
Yeah, sure. I would start with, it's probably a philosophical question in some ways, because you have a classical risk and return piece, and the thing is that if you look into the future, of course you can work 3 years in a standard job in a corporate that will earn you decent money, but you will never get asset rich or asset money. So this is just a question of personal ideas and goals. And I think if you go to a corporate WhatX company builder, it can range from 80% for you and 50%. It depends on how much of your idea is given into the whole thing. How much have you already provided? Is it totally already there's a prototype? So there's various ways. I said that we initially invest 250,000 euro. And then it's like I said, depending on how much time you've spent before with the company, are you a captain of trajectory? Like, have you already developed it yourself? And then this is also a part of the negotiation in the beginning. And then on the other hand, if you just develop it inside of Viessmann in our venture development Freudscher Versprecher. So inside the venture development department, then it's mainly no shares, but you get a decent bonus incentive because you get a lot of money from the corporate to develop your idea in this setting. So it's more a bonus structure.
Can I add to that? We've in Enkel have had a few kind of these internal company building projects, and funnily enough, most of the conversations was not about the compensation structure, because we always pushed that it needs to mirror the market, because if you're not mirroring the market, those people will likely go and do it somewhere else. The biggest discussion was focused on, should those individuals have a golden parachute back into the organization if things go wrong? You know, the jury is kind of still out on that. I don't know if you have a point of view on that, but it's, you know, if you had asked me 5 years ago, I would have said absolutely no. But today, you know, I take myself, you know, I'm not the youngest kid on the block, and if I have a great idea and I know of a great team and I can do something, but I have kids and everything, you know, yeah, it makes sense to maybe know that I would have a safety blanket to fall back on if something goes wrong. So.
What's actually quite interesting, there was a recent study, I think, from the University of Berkeley, which is obviously quite liberal. But the interesting finding was they tried to find common traits among entrepreneurs, and it's really funny because normally you don't find any common traits among entrepreneurs. But one common thing they found that was really interesting, that a lot of the top US entrepreneurs today are coming from fairly wealthy backgrounds. Which was, I mean, Steve Jobs, no, but, you know.
Nothing to lose.
Evan Spiegel, Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, and the list goes on. I mean, they all come, or not all, but a lot of them come from fairly wealthy backgrounds. And the reasoning was also, whether that's true or not, they don't have a golden parachute back in the organization, but they know even if they fail, it's not a complete disaster because the family will basically cover up for them. And I think there's a point in that. And so I'm also moved away from the point that everybody has to be a risk taker. If you have 3 kids and a wife that doesn't understand what you're doing 100%, you cannot just say, oh, we just failed, let's move out. We're moving to
somewhere else.
Cottbus. So and I can really another thought that adds to that is, and you've seen that also in the industry, people are a lot more open to secondaries, I think, for founders. I think it's completely okay if, you know, people that have lived off 50,000 euros for 5 years and worked their asses off, that they get some liquidity. That doesn't mean that they're not convinced. It just gives people peace of mind. I think it also depends on who people are, but there's very few people that I've met that are so reckless they don't give a shit. So and that's why I've really changed my view on that as well. And I would, especially if you have responsibility for other people around you, I think the argument is definitely very valid. So we have 5 minutes left, and what I want to do if we have 5 minutes left is we want to open up the floor to questions. You can ask whatever mean question you want to. All grown-ups here.
Thank you very much. Lawrence Lemhouse, my name. Basically, the reason why everyone is up there is because you have pressure coming from us, the consumer. For myself, I work in the defense industry. I know, not very popular, But nevertheless, I have an industry which is extremely technologically driven, which needs to open up, but I have only one customer, which is the state. At the very end of the day, how do I get an industry to open up to startups, tell them, hey, you need to sort of advance and open up, whereas the customer is far behind when it comes to, well, innovation?
I'm happy to take a stab at that one. So the way and this is obviously a personal point of view, the way a lot of corporates work is where I would take the lesson from. Many corporates today have a very risk-averse approach, similar to what you're describing, and they kind of look over the shoulders and look around to see what everybody else is doing, and until that happens, then they act. So my recommendation would be, and I don't know if it would work, is to look around, because if you're talking about locally, there is so much happening on a global perspective in that particular space that if you're not paying attention to it, you could be sitting with some really old artillery in the immediate future.
Yeah. And actually what might also be an interesting thought, a lot of the venture capital in the US, even today, is invested into somehow related to the defense forces startups. And the same goes for Israel. Yeah? So even if the state is not reacting, in other nations or in other regions, that is definitely a very startup-driven environment. That's at least and that could probably help to convince, because obviously, I mean, Israel and the US are both have a reputation of being quite able to defend themselves compared to us, at least. Yeah, we don't have that reputation anymore, which is okay, I guess. But yeah, so. Anybody else having a question? If no, I would say thanks a lot for listening, and the gentlemen will be around at least for some more minutes, so if you want to approach them, feel free.